If I could tell the world something about COVID, I would say that nobody knows what COVID is until you've seen it firsthand. In early May, we traveled to International Falls, my husband and our youngest daughter, for the funeral of his grandma. And she had lived a long and full, and I think she would have thought too long of a life. And so it was a celebration with family and friends and people that had known his grandma for so long. And so we had had a vacation up by the lakes because it wasn't the kind of trip where we were just so sad. We enjoyed time with family, most of whom had been vaccinated, and there were masks worn and there was social distancing. We came back on Sunday, and by the following Saturday, Rob was having difficulty breathing. He was coughing a lot. He just felt under the weather, and so he thought he needed to come in and get some steroids or something to just kind of open his lungs a little bit and help him get over whatever this bug was. While there, he came to our walk-in clinic, and while there, he asked the provider to test him for COVID just so that he could prove to his boss that he was COVID negative and he could go back to work. Rob rarely missed a day of work. And he came home. I remember him coming home on Saturday. He says, they tested me for COVID. And I just said, well, I hope it's not COVID. And within an hour, he got a call and was told that he was, in fact, COVID positive. At that point, they gave him more medication, and he was to self-isolate and take this medication and rest. We did get a pulse oximeter to use at home to be able to test the oxygen level in his blood. And the next day he helped me. That Sunday he helped me put the boat in the water for the first time. He was feeling okay enough that he drove me down to the water and helped me put the boat in and made sure that we were going to get around the lake okay. And then he just went in and rested for a while. He stayed home that week, of course, and by Thursday, friends were texting as a group, and Rob wasn't responding, and so I called him, and he didn't answer, and I thought, man, maybe he's sleeping, so I ran home in between meetings, and he was awake and talking to the dogs, but he was really, really out of breath. And I just asked him, I said, what's your oxygen level like? And he says, well, I haven't tried it. And I said, okay, let's put it on right now and see. I put it on his finger, and not being a nurse, I thought for sure I was doing something wrong because his oxygen level was between 64 and 67%. And I knew that couldn't be right. I didn't know exactly what it should be, but I figured we need oxygen to live. And I said, babe, I really think we should go in and get some oxygen. And so I brought him to the ER, and he was put in a room almost immediately. Upon arriving, they did another oximeter reading, and his level was 74. So our home meter may have been off, or he may have just been sitting and not getting enough oxygen in. But either way, the number was bad. And he was put on an oxygen mask, on supplemental oxygen immediately. He was seen by a number of providers, all who had to put on all of their PPE to come in and out. And I, of course, at that point was in the ER with him, and I'm not sure that I was supposed to be, because our visitor restrictions don't allow for in and out of visitors with COVID. But he hadn't been admitted at that point. But everybody else who came in and out, it would take them moments to get ready to come in and moments to get ready to go out. It was seemed like such an ordeal to even just come in and check a monitor or anything. They did a CT scan and an X-ray, and there was pneumonia found in both of his lungs. His oxygen level was not increasing as much as they wanted with the supplemental oxygen, and so they kept moving up with the type of oxygen that was offered to a high flow and BiPAP. It was pretty quickly decided, and I don't know that Rob knew so much, but I knew from the conversations that were being had that Rob was going to be admitted, and he was going to be admitted to the ICU and not just the COVID floor, because his symptoms were that bad. So that night he was admitted to the ICU, and he was on a BiPAP the entire time. They tried so many of the medications. You know, there's all this back and forth about all these different medications and how people think, oh, the ivermectin should be tried, and hydrochloride, all these different things. And I know that our providers in the ER and in the ICU gave Rob every possible medication that they thought might have an effect on him. But nothing did. We had a wonderful nurse in the ICU. Her name was Zoe. And she and Rob got along really well. For as much as Rob could talk, I had brought him some dry erase boards. I sat outside of his room. He was in a negative pressure room, and I sat outside and looked through a window at him, but he could see me. And so we would write messages to each other on the dry erase board. And he would write messages to Zoe, sometimes teasing her, sometimes asking for something, letting her know how he was feeling. They started proning him while he was on the BiPAP, and that means that they would flip him from his back to his front, and then again back to his back within different hours of the day. And they did this to try to move the pneumonia in his lungs. I never saw Rob's oxygen level get back up above 95, 96% ever. On May 29th, it was my birthday, and Rob had worked with Zoe to have flowers and a bracelet and chocolates there for me when I got to the hospital. And that night, he was intubated. I had gotten home while he was still on the BiPAP and got a phone call from the night nurse. And she said, "It's time, but Rob won't do it unless you're here." I immediately returned to the ICU. And I called for a chaplain to come in. And the chaplain's policy was that they would not go into COVID rooms for the protection of themselves and for the other patients that they saw. And so I prayed the Our Father with Rob. And I talked to him. He wrote a note on his dry erase board. "I am logical. I know what needs to be done. I just need to make peace with it." He was worried because for as many people as come off the fence alive, there's that many that don't. And I told him, I would never let them do something that I knew would take him away from me. I believed that event was the next step and that we needed to do it. But that was my last conversation with my husband. That was the night of May 29th, May 30th, and he was transferred to the University of Minnesota, airlifted. He was put on life support here, airlifted there. And he was pronounced dead on June 3rd. I don't know why people think that it's okay to say, well, they could be treated with this and this and this and this. Why wait for treatment? Why get sick and then want treatment? Why not avoid COVID in the first place?